The Trump administration may be considering a massive overhaul of the State Department, according to a draft executive order shared over the weekend. First reported by the New York Times, the document lays out plans for a drastic restructuring that includes eliminating almost all operations in Africa and closing American embassies across Southern Africa. It also proposes cutting offices working on issues like climate change, refugee issues, and democracy and human rights. The Trump administration claims the document is not legitimate, and the White House directed NBC News to a post from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who posted on X, "This is fake news. The New York Times falls victim to another hoax." Joining me now is veteran foreign affairs journalist Elise Labott. She is the Edward R. Murrow Press Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and author of Cosmopolitics on Substack. So, Elise, is it really fake news? I mean, considering that you have a White House memo that details out of the Office of Management and Budget would cut 48% of the department's funding. So, I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, you know, what's left?
Well, I mean, Michael, I think it's going to be that document. I don't think is really going to see the light of day, although I think it might have had, I think some career diplomats must have leaked it because they wanted to kind of get discussion going about how ridiculous it would be and kind of quash it. Honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if Marco Rubio himself was involved in the leak. Why? Because Marco Rubio doesn't believe that the State Department should be gutted in this way. He's someone who believes in a very robust, presence for the United States. But what I really think is going on is it's very similar, Michael, whether this is the actual document that's going to be released. It's very similar to what we read in Project 2025, when you see this kind of real gutting of the State Department. And it's kind of part two of what President Trump did in his first term, which is really get rid of, senior diplomats, close a lot of the offices, and really concentrate power back over at the White House. And it's basically, if you read what they're saying, it's about trying to align all foreign policy with an America First vision, which President Trump said he wanted to do.
But America First, folks, just for the record, is sort of a backwards view of the world, and it makes no sense. And when you've got American diplomats themselves calling this bonkers crazy pants, you're kind of getting and because these folks don't say a whole lot because they're diplomats, they keep their mouths kind of shut.
Right, not diplomatic language.
Exactly. So what is going on here? Because Marco Rubio is an interesting fixture in all this, given his leadership in the foreign policy space in his years in the Senate.
Exactly.
To have him now be basically the executioner of the Department of State and a number of its ancillary national security components, to me, just seems Trump just punking the hell out of the secretary.
Well, I mean, I can't imagine that Marco Rubio had anything to do with writing it. I mean, I think this is probably happening around around him. People of this MAGA crowd really wanting to pursue this fundamental restructuring of a more isolationist U.S. policy. It's really just more of a retreat, which would reduce America's footprint. Obviously in Africa, giving China, you talk about great power competition with China. This just basically hands over Africa, where there's a lot of minerals, there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of youth, a lot of growth, basically over to the Chinese, who have been making a lot of inroads economically and diplomatically. It takes U.S. diplomatic priorities away from traditional areas, as you said, like human rights, democracy, towards like very narrower economic interests. And it's, puts a lot more control over the messaging. It basically kind of muzzles career diplomats. And it's really going to be hard in terms of talent. Now, look, they're also talking a lot, Michael, about how you would recruit foreign service. officers.
Right.
And this is what's really interesting to me, is because they're talking about, a litmus test, like kind of like what President Trump said he was going to do with the Supreme Court, which is, do people fundamentally align with his vision? As you know, State Department diplomats, foreign service officers are non-political. A lot of them serve over the course of many diplomatic and Republican administrations. Right. And politics doesn't enter into it. This is basically, exactly what they're saying. This would be the kind of first question, is where do your political allegiance lie? Do you fundamentally agree with President Trump? I've heard that a lot of people are being asked who they voted for when they're being asked about special jobs. And so, not only is this bad for U.S. policy around the world in the near term, but in the far term, it's just going to make it really difficult for the U.S. to engage with allies and have a diplomatic presence.
All right. Elise Labott, bringing it, keeping it real. Thank you so much, Elise. Really good to see you. Up next, because nothing is sacred for Trump, the White House's annual Easter egg roll now has corporate sponsors. Today's spectacle after the break.